if you are someone who is running a business, that the greatest authority in the industry is you. You are the one who has the answers. The inner being knows what it is that you need and what it is that you want. There are certain structures and strategies that work, but ultimately you are the authority. So if something doesn't feel good with you, if something feels off in you, then that's up to you to explore and to find a way to integrate and pave your own path. Because if you try to do anything out of shoulds or have to's, or because it's what some guru told you, it's just not going to work. So trust yourself, trust your inner authority. Obviously, do the things that work for you, and that's where you're going to find the most success in your business.
Welcome to Queen Bold EQ podcast, where I share with you the mindset, energetics, emotional intelligence, and habits required to transform your health and manifest your dream body. I'm your host, 𝘠𝘂𝑐𝑂𝗿, a 20-plus year fitness professional, lifelong entrepreneur, and I have self-healed my chronic pain and my emotional eating. And I am here to share with you the spiritual and the practical so you can transform your health and manifest your dream body. You guys, this is episode 14, and I was like, oh, I love this. This is like a love day.
Wait, 14 is my birthday and my favorite number.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. I didn't even realize.
And then when I was doing the numerology about it, I was like, oh, but 1 + 4 is 5, and 5 is the fifth element, which is God. I was like, this is a really good, this is a good day. Yeah. So you guys, I'm here with Katie Townsend, and I'm so excited, like legit, like I couldn't even believe it. It took me like so long to make the graphic. It like slipped my mind. I was like, how could you do that? Because the conversation that you're going to have today is literally one of your favorite conversations. And so I'm going to slow down. Hopefully I'll slow down because I'm like bursting at the seams. So Katie and I met over the summer in a mastermind, and you were like my number one cheerleader. You were so encouraging. And I like tell, I did a podcast where I was like, I'm the one who did not belong in the room financially. Like I was lowest woman on the totem pole. Like it was like financially did not belong to be there, but I was like, I have to be there. And it was like, you were just amazing. So there's that. And then, so Katie is a 6-figure fempreneur, and we're going to be talking about the inner child.
Yeah.
And so I have a million questions to ask you, but I want you to jump in and start, like, introduce yourself a little bit, like how you got to where you are, that type of thing before I start jumping in with questions.
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to respond to something that you said is like, I've been in a lot of rooms where I felt like I wasn't the one who belonged there because like maybe I didn't make as much money as everyone else, or I was just starting or whatever. And what I've learned is like that person is the most important person in that group. They're the ones who are really like reflecting back to us what it is to be at that beginner stage and what it is to be a student and a teacher and all of it. So like always the most important person in the room. And I'm happy that I was able to give you that experience, but it was really just because I love you and I love your energy and I love everything that you do. So I was like, go girl. Yes. Love it. But really quick, who I am, my name is Katie Townsend. I am a trauma-informed business coach, and I help rebel women build 6-figure businesses their way. And how I came to be a trauma-informed business coach, because some people are probably like, what the hell is that? I actually began my career as a therapist. So I got into the mental health field after decades of substance abuse that were results of complex trauma and all of that. So when I got sober, I immediately realized like, okay, I've healed so much and I see the power of this work. I want to be a therapist. So I went back to school. I got my master's degree in social work, and I'm a high achiever, which is a trauma response. And so I did it very, very quickly, and I hustled my ass off. I also had a business on the side where I was selling like healing jewelry on Etsy and mentoring women in recovery and doing like all these side marketing gigs for people. Cause I always had I just really loved social media. I just loved it. And I found it like a really amazing platform to connect. So after about 10 years in mental health, and 4 years practicing as a therapist, I was not licensed, but I was under supervision. And so I had tons of clinical hours and I was working in substance abuse. I was like, this just isn't the vibe anymore. Like, I felt, maybe some of you can relate, like I felt there was a bigger calling on my life. I wanted freedom. I didn't want to be stuck in this corporate patriarchal structure of like hustle till I die mentality and build other people's dreams. And also a really sad realization that I had is that like when you're in the mental health field, they don't really prioritize mental health for employees in the mental health field. And I was like, damn, I just want to be able to take a day off. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to have space and freedom. But I also want to make a huge impact. So I discovered coaching and I left my 9 to 5. And I tried to figure it out on my own for a while. And that didn't go so great. However, the universe always delivers. So I was fully supported during that time in all different unexpected ways. But when I finally hired my first business coach, I was able to have my first 10K month about 45 days later. And since then, my business has evolved tremendously to where it is today. But in the past under 3 years, I've turned it into a $500,000 brand and business. And I just love the work I do because I help women like me. I help women who desire to have a business that makes an impact, but also gives them freedom, but have noticed that along the path, there's some stuff from our past that shows up and creates resistance, slows down the process, makes us even unhappy with the success that we've achieved. And so I do a lot of inner child healing work with my clients, as well as teaching them business strategy, because I don't believe it's one or the other. It's both always. The inner work creates the outer result, and having a strategy to follow allows you to get the outer result as well. So that's like in a nutshell what I do, what I care about, what I'm passionate about. I truly believe that women are meant to be leaders and we're meant to be wealthy. And a big part of what I do is making sure that the women who are called to that achieve it, so we can create a massive movement of wealth redistribution on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like 10 episodes in that one statement.
Which do you want to start? Where do you want to start?
What I want to start with is that, you know, to say how much money that you've built and to be in a coaching business where you're teaching women how to make money. For me, when I look at the things that we want that we can't get to, that's like one of like the games of the game of life, where we're trying to have the soul experience, and there's like levels to not hardship, like, even though that's a thing, but like there's like levels of resistance that like we have to get through, like Super Mario Brothers, and like money is like one of them, and we get conditioned with it, with like all these variables. But it's the thing that like when you break apart the negative self-image and the negative feelings that we have attached to the money, then we get like a piece of our soul back because it's so connected. And one of the things that you said about like that, you know, that there was this hustle culture, it's like, for me, like I've been a high achiever also, and nothing was ever good enough. And like, I've had to like actually look back at the things like on paper and be like, oh, you did a really good job. You've actually been like really successful. It just hasn't maybe felt that way because that was your perception. So one of the things that like I want to dive into right now is that it felt like when we have the hustle culture and we had a lot of like patriarchal systems, which I don't want to talk shit about like anything male or patriarchal, but like that category of maybe people didn't have anything to overcome, or maybe they just like didn't have the sad emotions that went with it. They used it to energize their growth. And so they were able to go. But maybe for like people like us who like maybe struggled a little bit more and been a little bit more on the sad spectrum, it's like so much to try to work through to be able to get there. But like once you get there, like you said, in 45 days, you had a $10,000 month, like you came into alignment, you know? And so I just want to like, I mean, that's part of like our emotional feminine stuff that we get to that point where we're actually feeling good enough to align with the rewards. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what like the culture feels like right now, like at least in the circles that like that we're connected with. I'm sure there's obviously going to still be the other side of it. So how do you feel? Well, yeah. How do you feel about, well, how did you make the connection that with the inner child? And for me, when I started to hear about inner child, I was like, I don't freaking get this. I do not understand inner child healing. And you know what I have? I actually last year put pictures of myself as a child because I hated being reminded of myself as a child, because I hated myself at such a young age that like to have pictures of myself and actually say, oh, she's a cute little girl, was actually just in the last year and a half.
Well, I'm so happy that you did that, Lauren, because that's huge. And a lot of us carry this deep rooted shame. And so like when we have trauma, it expands our shame core, so to say, but also you don't have to have trauma to carry shame. It's just something that happens from society and conditioning. And so like when I talk about patriarchal structures or the feminine experience or feminine leadership, like I'm not separating one from the other. They're together and they work together, and both have functions when they're from a healthy, adaptive place that work really well and they're meant to. But there are a lot of things in our society that create shame for women around our bodies, around who we are. And those things show up in business. And so in order to feel safe, being visible, speaking our truth, making money, talking about money, having money, being successful, being confident, all of that goes back to our childhood experience. And so if at some point in our childhood, we were made to believe that showing up and being intelligent, speaking up for ourselves, being confident, the way we look, all of these things is somehow, somewhere along the line, the smallest thing made us believe that that was not enough or too much, because that's something that you use in your programs a lot. So just bad or wrong, which is not enough, too much, unworthy, shame, then that's going to carry with us throughout our life, and it manifests in different ways. And a lot of the time for me and a lot of the women I work with, and I know for you too, it comes in the over functioning. It's like, I'm going to do, create, because then I'll be accepted inside of this culture that is, I feel like my worth, and it's not necessarily true, but it's what we believe, is that my worth is determined by what I can achieve and what I can create and the numbers that are surrounded around me, whether that's weight or a bank account. So like, it's all connected to this thing is like, if I get this, then I'll be worthy of love and belonging. And until I actually achieve that, then I'm not enough. And so I need to prove that I'm enough. And it all just comes from this place of shame from, it's not ever even one experience. It's a multitude of experiences that happen when we're little. And so one of the things you highlighted it, one of the things I do with my clients is like, get a picture of yourself when you were a child. And let's do some affirmations to the picture and bring her into the conversation so that we can heal her, so she feels safe showing up in your business, right? So I totally get, like, I'm so happy you got those pictures of yourself when you were a child and put them up.
Yeah. Well, they were in my care package from my dad when my dad disowned me when I was 18.
That's so much. Like, and see what I mean? Like, this is, but like, and Lauren, like, I love your vulnerability, because this is the human experience. Like, this is the shit that happens. Like, there are fucked up things that happen to us as humans, especially with our parents. And like, that stuff needs to be normalized, like, not to say that it's okay, but normalized so that people know, like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's something that happened with them that did that to you, and it's not yours to carry or internalize.
Yeah. I feel like our conversation can go so into the non-physical, and I'm really trying to refrain myself and really make this applicable to the like tangible money. But I have to say it. Cause like, I mean, your Etsy shop, like you're all into like the spiritual stuff.
Yes.
So I feel like on a very large non-physical spiritual level, part of our mechanics that we go into overachieving is because the feminine energetics is all about delivering what's desired. It is like the impregnation. It is the thing. She prints it. She gives it. Like, you know, I think in a lot of mechanical terms with the energy stuff, I think just because of my fitness background. So I see the divine feminine as a printer, like an actual printer. You plug in what you want and it comes out. But part of what I feel like is that like in the like evil structure of like the game of life of live energy and then reverse spun energy, which is evil, which is not of God, that to remove the feminine Godhead is because if you can control the feminine energetics, then you can get people to like, you can wind them up like a bunch of dolls and just get them to produce for you. And so we have this like energetic system that's like always on overdrive, where nobody's actually being able to experience like themselves or God, or like have the spiritual experience in the flesh. And when I started to see some of the like inner child wounding as a larger context of like, it wasn't necessarily my dad, it wasn't necessarily this is just part of it. And like, there has to be some delivery system. So I'm actually like up against these like spiritual motherfuckers, like dad, okay, whatever. Like, you're like this big compared to like the larger context of like what I feel like we're playing around with. Yes. And so it lights me up when it's like money is a construct that like we can break through and have this like extraordinary experience of how like it was naturally designed, that you thought of it, it came.
Yeah, I love this, because it's really about where we make these figures in our life, whether they're human, whether they're our parents, or in my industry specifically, other coaches, where we make other coaches and money idols, when we idolize them, when we create them into this fixture of like, this is the thing that is impeding on me, or that I need to become in order to be the person who gets what I desires and be functioning in society and be accepted and all of that thing. Because the core thing behind this is I want to be accepted and I want to belong and I want to be able to create the life that I desire. I want to have my desires. And so when we have experienced trauma, that person becomes the idol, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And it's like, that's the person that we're always trying to prove that we're good enough to through our actions. And we'll say we hate that person. I hate them. I don't want anything to do with them. Or we won't actually hold them to a standard of like what they did and like acknowledge what they did. And they just become this idol that kind of like, we become like the pawn that's controlled by this thing, and we're moving from it and we don't even realize it. And I see it happen a lot, like when you move into the online space with money, where money will become the idol. And it's like, if I can just make enough money, then I'll be happy, then I'll feel whole, then I'll feel good enough, and then I'll be functioning in this conditioning that everybody's told me I have to function in order to be a valued coach, in order to be a valuable human, all of the things. And so money becomes this construct of pain, of desire and pain, and we idolize it. And then all of a sudden you get it, right? So like a big thing for me, that when I first started to connect the dots between money and the trauma and the business, was when I had my biggest cash month. It was actually like the third one in a row. And I was like, I feel triggered. Like I feel triggered as like, I don't know if I can curse in your thing. I feel triggered as heck. And like, I was like, oh, this is my inner child wounding playing out, because I didn't feel worthy of the money. I felt like I was somehow an imposter with the money. I started to get anxious, and my anxious avoidant pattern started to play out with the money. And like all of this stuff started happening. I was like, but money is neutral. Like, it's just a thing. Why am I having such a reaction to it? And so from there, I had to dig deep into what was happening with me and my inner child. And then like, after doing that work with myself and the years of experience that I have doing this work with clients, I was like, oh, I almost gained like a superpower to like, my cat just came in. Oh, there's like this person, I see what's going on over here with you. I see why you're scared to show up. I see why you're freaking out about this no on the sales call. I see why this is happening over here with after you just had your big cash month and now you're freaking out and want to sabotage and never show up on social media again. Like, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I started to connect the dots, and it really does come from that construct that you were talking about of like, money and society and conditioning from the doing, as opposed to like, we can allow ourselves to do and be at the same time and receive, and not make it mean anything about who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's like the neutral thing with food, that this is where then whatever we're focused on, whatever the idol is, that's where the self-reflection comes, like unconscious, that we're looking for that sense of wholeness because we're thinking that that's the thing. And that thing that we're focused on, money or food or diet or exercise, is the personification. I don't know if that's the right word. It is the personality of your perpetrator.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because you just shifted. You don't know that you're operating like that. It's your inner child. I always say like, not always say, I'm like, your inner child is operating your body when you're doing this thing. Right. So for someone who hasn't like heard the terms of inner child, or like, how do you describe it to someone when like you're breaking it to them of like, this is actually what you're dealing with? you're not, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you think it's a thing. Yeah.
So, I mean, I like to keep things simple. So the inner child is just the past version of yourself that maybe felt wounded or unaccepted or kind of repressed within you, like felt like they couldn't actually be themselves at that point in their life. And because of that, they kind of got frozen in time within you. And so you matured, your body matured because that's what we do physically, but the emotional maturity got stunted because there's this repressed little girl inside of you that didn't feel seen or heard or validated. And so now that version of you, it could be your inner child, it could be your inner teenager, it could be your inner young adult, but these past versions of yourself get kind of stuck in time and they begin to unconsciously act out in your life, and they seek validation or chaos or these things that are trying to get their needs met the same way they did when they were a child that might have been unhealthy, or the needs never got met. So they're just constantly seeking them. They don't even know what it would feel like to have their needs met. So it's just a past version of you that kind of got stuck in time because there was a wound or an emotional injury that happened. And so now we have to integrate her into present you, which means we need to care for her, witness her, see her, and validate her. Or him.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I was putting that stuff together, when you're talking about like getting stuck in time, and again, like into the spiritual context of stuff of like past lives and parallel lifetimes and all these things, it's like you can go through space and time, and it's through your mind. And when I started to see, like, because I got like way out there with the spiritual stuff, and I'm glad I did, because there's a whole bunch of like really cool stuff that I learned and felt like I had access to. But then I was like, wait a minute, this is also for this lifetime. And my neighborhood, like I live in the house, like I live in the house that I used to live in when I was a kid. And the house that I lived in before that is pretty local. And one day I was listening to something while I was on my walk, and I just felt like you need to get all of your pieces. And then all of a sudden I realized I was next to the house when I was 5. So I leaned up against the wall and I just put my hand on my heart and I visualized myself inside that bedroom. And I was just like, let me gather all of my fragments, because like energetically, like emotionally, this mental emotional identity that we have is chemical and vibrational. Like the chemical is inside of us, the vibration is emanating from us, but I feel like you could like drop off pieces of yourself, and like, you don't necessarily have to go like to the same area, but it was just like, I put my mind back in areas where I could remember where my body was. And I was just like, come here.
Yeah.
Like, let's come.
This is everything. This is everything, Lauren. Like it's amazing how intuitively we know what we need, right? Like intuitively we know what our need, like our mind and our subconscious and our higher self will lead us to what we need to heal always. It obviously helps when you have support and coaching and mentorship to move you towards that faster or help you see what you can't see. But this is a practice I do. And so just kind of like for a practical thing for anybody listening, you can go and recollect these parts of yourself that have fragmented, because that happens to us. We fragment, especially during trauma or and so let me clarify something right here really quick before I continue on with this. When I say trauma, people might disconnect and say I didn't have trauma. Trauma is subjective. It is something that happened that was overwhelming to the system that you could not integrate at the time. You literally could not process at the time. So sometimes people hear trauma and they're like, well, I didn't have like abuse or neglect, so therefore I didn't have trauma. It could be bullying. It could be shaming in school. It could be a breakup. It could be all types of things. But if it was overwhelming for you, then it's considered trauma. And during those periods where something is overwhelming to the system, the emotional reaction to what the stimuli is overwhelming to the system, we fragment, we disassociate. Things happen in us and we have to kind of like calibrate, because the brain and the body are so beautiful and they do that to protect us. But there's pieces that get knocked out, right? And like to different places. And so when that happens, we want to go back to that time and place and bring her back, bring that inner child back or that inner teenager. So a practical exercise that I do with my clients is literally just a meditation and visualization of you going back to the times and places that you can remember, where you remember the emotional injury. So a big thing that we work on is like visibility. feeling worthy of attention, right? Because that's a huge part with your audience and content and bringing in sales and new clients. With money, where we felt like money was used as maybe a manipulation or control tool that hurts us. Or any time where we just felt that we weren't good enough, right? We felt like we just got dismissed or neglected or harmed in some way, and we didn't get our needs met and we weren't seen. So going back to like literally sitting, going into meditation, revisiting the memory, and then seeing what's happening, orienting around you of like what's happening, witnessing the memory, witnessing what you're experiencing, and then standing in between you and in between the inner child and the experience, like seeing yourself, present day self, standing in between inner child and the experience and asking her, hey, do you want to come with me? And then walking her out the closest door that you can remember after you oriented yourself, and then imagining her coming back into this present moment with you now. And then you just do that for each thing the same way you leaned up against that house, and you can bring her back into the present moment now and let her know that she's safe and kind of take her out of that frozen experience that you're in.
That's like making me cry. Because that's what it feels like. When you realize it's pieces that you lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lost, but not gone. We can go back and bring her back into the conversation. And
lost like you lost your keys.
Yeah.
You're going to get them back. It's lost, but air quote lost. Yeah, you can't.
Yeah,
you can't
exactly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So there was one thing that when you talked about like money and manipulation, you know, I mean, I love your feed because you'll talk about attachment theory, which when the light bulb went on for me, that attachment theory applied to diet, food, and exercise, I was like, you know, if someone understands attachment theory and they have a weight problem, here, they'll get it. Like they'll be able to do the inner work. Like all these systems, I feel like for those of us who have worked through this stuff, like we actually can like pinpoint the focal points of like where we're creating the same experience. So when I noticed that you had that same language and you said something else. Well, I just think like the inner child and attachment theory. So one of the things that, because if we know the pattern and we know the mechanism that starts to happen, then we can like have these like nervous system regulation stuff that I know you teach to your clients too, of like, then you like slow down the stress response so that you can actually watch it. Like you can watch it like a mouse maze, you know, the cheese and stuff. And instead of like being in the full emotional experience of the trigger. So when you're looking at attachment theory and money, and I know that you've talked about your dad with money, but I don't remember exactly what the story is with your dad and money, but I know that you've talked about how you were able to identify that. How can you put that together for an example of how we can work with this?
Okay. I love this. I love this topic. I love talking about this because the way that we attach to our caregiver, and I assume your audience understands attachment theory, is like the way that we attach to our caregiver was the first representation of money, of a higher power, of money, and of safety and security, of love. And so what we end up doing is we create the same attachment styles that we have with our caregiver and in relationships with money, because money is so closely related to love and security. And so I know, like an example for me, I'm anxious avoidant. That's how I am in relationships. It's how I am with money. And like, it's something
I'm fearful avoidant.
Okay. So then like, you get it, right? Like, so we have these styles, and we're always moving towards secure, but secure, I think sometimes gets like this idolization. It takes time. Like no one is like absolutely secure with money. So there's no shame here if you have challenging relationship with money, right? Like, but for me, how I was able to start to piece this together and how it worked was by writing out my money story. And if you've never done money mindset work before, this is a huge piece of being an entrepreneur. I highly suggest that you do it, because when you understand how you relate to money and the beliefs and story that you've created around it, from there, we can start to identify your attachment style with money. Because when you're starting to look at your money story, you're looking at what were you told about money? How did your parents relate to money? How did they talk about money in the house? How was money given to you? How was it spent on you? We start to explore. And from there, we can start to see, oh, shit, okay, like I have a anxious attachment style, or I have an anxious avoidant, or I just have an avoidant, or I have a fearful avoidant, and we can start to see how these patterns play out. So for example, what this looks like for me is I had a father who was the primary caregiver in the house, the primary breadwinner in the house. It was a very like traditional home, like dad went to work, mom stayed home, and dad made all the money and mom spent all the money. So dad was always very anxious about money in the house because there was never enough, even though we had enough, there was never enough. And mom would just spend it all and not even look at it and then do all these things, right? And so that was the turning point where I was like, oh, I can see how not only I do this in relationships, but I do this with money. So I'm like, I'll get hyper focused on money for a period of time, be like, there's never enough, but then I'll freak out and avoid looking at money and managing my finances and doing all of the things because it just feels safer to not look at it. Right. Mm-hmm. So I did an entire masterclass on this, and it is really funny because, and in the work that I do with my clients, is like, there's a lot of people who are very anxious. Anxious seems to be the one that people lean towards more. And avoidant is like the second, but the anxious avoidant, that was kind of like, there was a fewer people in that category. So it was interesting to see how it works out. But definitely, like, if you wanted to explore this more, you could just potentially go online and take an attachment style quiz, and then look at what it's telling you about your relationships, and then just compare it to how you relate to money and see what comes up for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I have in Bigger, Bolder, Braver, my inner child program, I copied and pasted a test. I gave credit to it, on the PDF, so people can go look it up and they know exactly where I got it from. But yeah, when that's exactly it. And when I saw that post about your dad and like how like the back and forth stuff, like I felt like that's how I had in both households, that I was like anxiety and avoidant. Like, so I got both of them. And I think a lot of us have both and show up in different areas.
Yeah. And it's really interesting too, because what will happen is like, I know how to create money, and a lot of my clients know how to too. Like, they know how to create money, but if you don't feel safe having the money, which is the anxious part of it, it's like, you don't feel safe having the money. So the avoidance style comes in and you just get rid of it all. You just start spending it all and giving it away, or things manifest, bills manifest, things happen. All of a sudden, it's like, you can't keep the money. Like it leaves faster than, like, you spend it faster than it comes, right? And it's like, but that doesn't make any sense. I'm making all of this money. Where is it all going? And it's truly from that avoidant style of like, yeah, anxious. I move into it. I get it done. I can get the money. Like, I get the money. I get the money. I get the money. But then the avoidant of actually looking at what's happening with it, because looking at it feels really fucking scary because you never believe that there's enough of it. So looking at it triggers you saying, it's not enough. I'm not making enough. I'm not worthy enough. I don't deserve to be a coach, blah, blah, blah. So instead of looking at it, you just spend it all right away because you don't even feel deserving of having it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very, very interesting the way these things play out.
Yeah. And then we could be like philosophers of it and like talk about it, which I know like so many people do. And that's another thing that I like about your feed, because you had something where you were like, you actually have to do the work. Like, and I'll say stuff like, you have to stop hanging out with your inner child. Like, there comes a point where like, you have to like move forward from this, and, so I want to talk about that. Like, how do you work with your clients to like get them to make that habit change? And how do you coach them through that angst, like where it just feel like, I feel like my heart just like is like in lead when you feel those old emotions come up, but you don't necessarily have the words for them. You just like feel the same way you did when you were little. And you're like, wah. So what's like the practical of like how to work through it, and like what happens when people hit that resistance and that identity crisis, really?
Yeah. So a big thing that I talk about, like with my clients, and I'll be on the lookout for, is where they use personal development and healing work as an avoidance tactic. So it's like, I don't actually want to go do the thing because I feel safer looking at all my problems and making myself wrong and making myself feel like a piece of shit, because that's always what I've kind of been told I am, or what I believe I am. So it just feels really safe and cozy over here to just stay doing shadow work and journaling and thinking about all the things and making myself this person that needs to be fixed before I can move. When in reality, you're actually just getting off on that. It's like, okay, like I'm getting off on the trauma. Like I'm just reenacting it over and over and over and over again by exploring it and doing the work. And it just becomes this pattern of avoidance and procrastination where you embody the identity of the person who's not able to be successful, who doesn't do the things, who's the irresponsible kid or whatever, right? And so I immediately just education first, like with my clients is like, okay, like this is something we're going to be on the lookout for. We're going to do the inner work, but a big part of the inner work is actually taking action. So I'm very practical. This was a big reason. Like even when I was a therapist, I had a very coaching style to what I did. Cause it's like, okay, we can understand the why, but the why isn't going to actually change anything. The why is actually the least important thing in what's happening. It's identifying the feeling the feeling, and then choosing to move into an action that's going to shift the feeling and change the state and change the identity. So what this looks like, I'm very much a proponent, feel your feelings. I don't bypass, like that's not what I'm here for, but I do a lot of like somatic work with my clients. So instead of doing thought work, which you'll just go in a spiral, it's like, okay, where's the feeling? Let's locate the feeling. Let's release the feeling. Let's move you into a state of action by giving you an actual plan. Like, okay, let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's hold you accountable to it. You're going to hold yourself accountable to it. And then we're going to observe what's happening to you while you're doing it. So we can work on the emotional and practical level so you can actually get the result that you're looking for. So, I mean, this is going to look different for each client specifically, depending on where they're at in their emotional intelligence, where they're at in their self-awareness, where they're at in their ability to regulate. Huge. So like the first step that I teach inside of my group programs are nervous system regulation. It's just baseline. Like we have to get your nervous system regulated. And then from there, you can actually, you said it, you can take an objective look at things and you can actually choose instead of just repeating patterns. And so we regulate, then we look at, okay, what are the action steps? I'm going to move you into the things that actually scare the shit out of you and trigger you, because if you just keep avoiding your triggers, you're never going to expand your capacity. So now that you know how to regulate, let's expand your capacity, move you into the things that scare you. Typically for my clients, that's going to be posting different types of content, looking at their money, inviting people to work with them, sales calls, making invitations, launching a program, things like that. The things that are like, that trigger the stress response in them. I'm going to tell them they should go do that. And I'm going to hold them while they move into that. And then we're going to continuously do the inner work of regulation and somatic releasing and thought awareness and shifting and changing to move you through to get the results. So you don't just stay stuck in this cycle of like, well, this is why I do that. And that's why I do this. And like, that doesn't even matter at a point. Once you have the awareness, it's your responsibility to now change it. So what are you going to do?
That was like so powerful. Your energy and your tone, it was boom, 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 boom. Like, yes. And I started to giggle a little bit, thinking like, oh, like posting, doing this, doing that. And it's like from the outside looking in, like somebody could be like, seriously, like this is a stress thing. But it's like, yes, because the focus is that if we do these things right, then we'll get the money. Then that means that we did it. Because like, you know, and it's like, it's just like, God. And it's just, that's everything, you know, it's everything. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, the irony for me of like having my entire adult life has been in fitness, but my whole life, I feel like it was just like figuring out like who to be in each place that I was at. And so it's like, I've been stuck on the why forever. And it's like, no wonder I've had so much chronic pain. And it took 2020 to be isolated, I feel like, from everybody else's little energy fields for me to actually like feel my emotions. I feel like I checked out of my body and like anything, whenever I was triggered, it would be body, it would be go work out, go do a thing, go do physically, so that I wouldn't have to feel the things, like get the endorphins, be like, oh, now I'm like not stressed out.
Yeah.
So like, I knew all this stuff. Like I took nervous system classes. So, you know, so I'm just like cracking up of like, yes, like the why, like we get so stuck on the why. And for me, everything turned out in physical. Like my financial status isn't like, you know, spectacular, but more of like my shit happened physically.
Yeah.
You know, I have physical ramifications of everything that you just described.
Oh, I love it because I work with spiritual coaches, healers, therapists, counselors, energy workers, and all of them come to me and they're like, I got this. I know the things. I'm like, okay. I'm like, let's go. I'm like, okay, let's start moving. And then I'm like, oh, well, you're not feeling the feeling and you're not processing the stuff and you're using this unhealthy coping mechanism over here. And this is perfectionism and this is this. And it's like, it's really easy to understand and conceptualize. It's a lot harder to practice. It's a lot harder to practice. And even when you know, there's always our blind spots and there's always a deeper level of self-connection and love that needs to happen in order for us to evolve. Because the problem is that we over intellectualize. It's actually a coping mechanism. So like we'll intellectualize and that's the why. And it just keeps us safe from actually feeling the feeling and changing, because the hardest thing to do is change your identity. Because when you detach from the why and the trauma and the things, now you have to actually take responsibility and say, wow, I was actually doing a whole bunch of shit that isn't in alignment with who I want to be. And like, I don't actually agree with, and now I have to become a whole new person. And that's an ego death. And that's why I do all these like death and rebirth programs and retreats and things, is because it truly has to be like this death and rebirth. We have to grieve the old self and be reborn as this new person, to detach from those old identities and beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm working through one with romance right now. I like see something that I knew, but seeing that next edge and be like, okay, it's going to require more effort now. Okay. Got it. So what is your edge? Like, do you have something that you're pushing against right now? Like,
oh girl, I got all kinds of edges. So like, we all are human beings. So I think an edge for me was really like, I realized that this is interesting. I haven't really fully shared this yet, but like, I know it's like, ooh, this is behind the scenes.
well, and I've been editing these now, like this is going to be like published forever tomorrow.
Oh, it's fine. I shared a little bit about it. I just haven't really, I communicate better through words. So I just haven't found a way to write about it yet. But like I was definitely in a fawn response for the past 2 years. And so an edge for me was like detaching from everything I've been taught by all the past coaches I've had, and the industry and all of that, and not being this person who's like trying to please my coach or be the person that I'm supposed to be. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the fawn response, it's very similar to like people pleasing behaviors. And so like, I didn't even see it until I saw it. I was like, holy shit, like I'm doing all of this people pleasing stuff with trying to sound like, not consciously, but sounding like my coaches and thinking I need to sound this way in order for people to buy from me, in order for me to be a millionaire coach and all of these things. Because last year I went through an income dip, which was hard, and like, again, people hear this who aren't in the industry, they're like, ooh, well, you still made like multiple six figures. So how could that be hard? And it's like, well, I also made like more than $50,000 less than I did the year before. And I was under the belief, which is not true, is that if you're not constantly like doubling your income every year, then you suck and you're not doing it right. Right. And so that was my own internalized shit. But like from there, and we have to go through the pain is the portal, right? So I was in a lot of triggered responses and pain, and I was being challenged and pushed up against edges emotionally and financially. And it wasn't happening for me the way it always did my whole life. Cause I was always the kid who was like, I'm going to go get it. And then I got it, and like was straight A student and like top performer in dance and top performer in college and magna cum laude and all these things. Like, and then all of a sudden it was like, kind of got knocked off my ego horse, you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, and it revealed to me that the reason that this was happening was because I wasn't in alignment with my truest self. I wasn't in alignment with how I wanted to express myself or run my business. And I was just adapting to who I thought other people wanted me to be in order to be successful. So I had to like go through a lot of healing in my nervous system and my own trauma healing to release some of that fawn response that was showing up in my business, so I could be coming from a place of my truest expression and feel in alignment with how I was showing up, how I was running my business and the programs I was offering and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Cause I'm like, yeah, it's like it doesn't end. You just find different areas that you can deepen it and expand your awareness.
Yeah. New level, new devil is the saying, right? It's like new level, new devil. So it's like, oh, okay, you're great. You're over here. But now there's a new piece of awareness that comes in about how old patterns show up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Totally. Well, before we wrap it up, is there anything that you want to leave listeners with?
Oh God, there's so much. Okay. So I would say that if you are someone who is running a business, that the greatest authority in the industry is you. You are the one who has the answers. The inner being knows what it is that you need and what it is that you want. There are certain structures and strategies that work, but ultimately you are the authority. So if something doesn't feel good with you, if something feels off in you, then that's up to you to explore and to find a way to integrate and pave your own path. Because if you try to do anything out of shoulds or have to's, or because it's what some guru told you, it's just not going to work. So trust yourself, trust your inner authority. Obviously, do the things that work for you. And that's where you're going to find the most success in your business.
I love that. That was amazing. Everyone, all the ways that you can connect with Katie is in the show notes. So definitely click the links to find her on Instagram and shoot her a DM when you listen to this episode. Katie, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. It was such a blast. I'm so happy I came. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you found it helpful, please share it on social media and tag me at It's Lauren 𝗤𝘂𝗍𝗏 and at 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. You can just search my name, Lauren 𝗤𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, on the IG and you should find both of those handles, no problem. I'm going to leave you with a few little snippets of the ladies who were in the very first Queen's Gambit with me. The Queen's Gambit is my year-long transformation where I give you all the coaching you need for mindset, emotions, habits, diet, exercise, and self-care.
First of all, thank you for just giving of yourself and allowing us to be in this space today. That's been really amazing to just see like how much you're giving to us. So thank you for that.
Because I'm not gonna go shame myself anymore. I'm not gonna go fucking judge myself. I'm fucking over it. I'm so fucking done with that old game. It's just an old game. I'm not gonna play anymore.
Adding upper body has actually been really good. I enjoy it because I've always been so scared of it.
The energetic stuff like has been really great for me because I think that's like what my like soul was craving. Like I've been wanting to know more, but like where do I start? So this has been super great.
New identity, new person, new body.
And it was like, I could never get past certain plateaus, but this makes so much sense.
Exercises go really well. It's so much fun to have finally a gym.
I remember because it was so significant to me. That was after COVID. It was really difficult for me to go back because I had gained weight. I felt really heavy after having been lighter and through COVID and not working out. That day was really nice because you like encouraged me to like continue. When you told me, you're like, you're strong, sweetie, like you can go heavy. And I was like, really? That like helped me just kind of develop that confidence.
And I'm like, well, I'm gonna take responsibility for the mistake, but I'm not gonna like shaming or blaming or judging. It's not gonna help me take the responsibility. It just makes it like harder. So why the F should I? Like make it hard for yourself. Come on.